It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning in St. Petersburg, this beautiful city. We are here and we have our hosts here, Alexander Sharapov and Igor Onokov, both from St. Petersburg, and are providing us here in St. Petersburg all the conditions so that we can have this marvelous time with information, with network, with our organization FIABCI. The moment that we are here now is very unique because the world is passing through a very difficult moment of a crisis. We see crisis in Europe, we see crisis in North America, especially in the United States. In many places of the world, the crisis is showing its ugly face. Also, this is a moment where the world is changing relations, changing the way we get known by each other, because information is always and gaining speed and gaining to each of us opportunities to get together. We have people here from the Middle East, with people from Africa, people from Europe, from South America, from North America, from the Far East, from all over the world. Not only that we are here today, and it's not so difficult to be together today because of the transports, but it's easy to continue this communication, to have this communication very dynamic through the electronic ways. And in this moment of crisis, we should take all the advantages that we can from these new opportunities and getting some information from the countries where the crisis is not so intense, and maybe we could exchange opportunities, we could exchange our informations on the countries so that we could make business together. Okay? Well, so since we're opening it now, I would like that Igor presented some of the things in Russia, and then we will have 5 presentations of people especially from the region here. We would like to end these presentations by around 10:15, 10:20, and then establish a dialogue between us. And then maybe each one would like to have a question, each one that would like to relate something very briefly that he would like to explain to us, he would like to tell us from their regions. You will be welcome to do it. Please, Igor, let us know how will we develop our panel here as well, and what is happening in Russia today. Thanks.
Good morning. It is a great pleasure for me to welcome our guests here in this elegant city of St. Petersburg at this wonderful time of year. I hope that you are enjoying your stay, not only because of this highly informative conference, but also
translation. Someone with problem with translation? Is it okay? It's channel 1. Okay.
English is channel 1.
English is channel 1 and Russian channel 2. Thanks. I'm sorry, Igor.
Действительно, вы сами, наверное, убедились.
Yes, indeed, I think you saw for yourselves that The topic that we're addressing here, namely how do we develop cities, historic areas, new projects, this topic is highly relevant for St. Petersburg. However, I would like also to start this discussion by identifying another important topic. Development is all about different areas and different built environment. The laws currently existing in Russia, unfortunately, do not contain a very clear definition of land as an asset. On the one hand, we have a good cadastral system, which is also online. So I think this part is progressing very well. On the other hand, the development of projects and the construction of buildings and houses is still not very well regulated. We have this federal law 214, a new law which came out in Russia. On the one hand, it contains a very good classification and division of work, who is responsible for what. However, it has a very unclear definition of what land means in the process of development. This precludes banks and various financial institutions from financing such projects efficiently because they cannot count on sufficient security provision. This is one issue that Russia is currently facing, and I hope that with Russia's accession to the WTO, as a result of Western developers coming in greater numbers to Russia, this problem will be even more painfully felt. On the other hand, there is another mechanism available, the cooperative mechanism. This mechanism is also part of the law, so it's a legally established mechanism. At the same time, it really minimizes the impact that a developer can have. Let me give you an example. In St. Petersburg, we don't have a single bank that would use this cooperative mechanism. And then the mortgage mechanisms are also underdeveloped. So this is one legal deficiency, regulatory deficiency that I would like to identify from the very start, because it has to do with the overall process of development. Currently, it happens that the main asset that Russia has is land. You know, Russia is the largest country of the world, so it's a very important asset. However, it is not very well regulated in terms of development. Land as an asset is outside of the financial turnover, so I believe this is indeed a challenge. With regard to the current situation in Russia, I would say that in St. Petersburg, at least, one of the biggest questions that we're asking ourselves is how will the city center develop down the road? There are two opposite views in existence here. One view is that the city center should be left as it is, as a museum. That probably means that the city center is not going to develop at all, and the maintenance costs associated with it will be skyrocketing. On the other hand, there is a pragmatic financial approach, according to which whatever is profitable needs to be built and should be built. Well, of course, these are two opposites, two extremes, and we cannot agree to any of these extremes, to either of these extremes. The golden middle ground, I guess, is somewhere in the middle. So it would be really interesting for us to hear you out, your views, your feedback, and your vision for the future of St. Petersburg. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Igor. We are starting to see some similarities between regions and countries. Laws, legal environment, they will be always one of the constraints that we have, although they will be also our institutions. So having good laws is one of the first things that we see here, and making the laws work. So having good laws and making or seeing that they work indeed. Banking systems, difficulties, just like we have also in Brazil, maybe a little less. Cooperation between cooperation mechanisms and mortgage systems to be developed. The assets in Russia, the land is really something that in some of the countries are starting to lack, to be very scarce material. Even though the country is a large country, maybe the law can restrict the use of land as well, just like in the city center of St. Petersburg. This preservation takes money. We need money to preserve. Should we preserve or should we develop? So we are already having some questions here, and I would like to hear from Dr. Chia Boon Kuah from Singapore, how these issues or other issues regarding regarding the development activity are there, showing their advantages and problems in Singapore today. Mr. Chia, please feel free to use there or here.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is my second time in St. Petersburg, and it's quite different. When I first came here, we came here to try to buy a hotel, and that was during winter, and we didn't get very far. We wanted to have a meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning, and our host didn't want to reply to us. And when we arrived in St. Petersburg, I found out why. The sun doesn't rise until maybe 11 o'clock in the morning. So it was a very short day. But that was a very interesting journey. We didn't buy the hotel. And exactly the situation as our second speaker presented. We weren't sure about the property laws. And despite all the legal advice, we didn't get very far. This morning, I'm going to take you through a pictorial presentation on what happened in Singapore. We became a republic not very long ago. In 1965, we broke away from Malaysia and we became a country on our own. Today, it is still a very small country, but a very wealthy country. Singapore is only 720 square kilometers. And later on, I have some statistics to show you where are we. This picture in front of you is not an artist's impression. It is a real development. This is our new downtown. The three buildings that stick into the sky, those are three hotels. And on top of the hotel, there's a podium, and that's a swimming pool and restaurants. My next slide. Okay. In the last 10 years, I would say, Singapore transformed dramatically. If you have been to Singapore 10 years ago, the Singapore then and today is vastly different. Even if you were in Singapore just 2 years ago, it is quite different. While we are a small country, the Singapore government decided about 10 years ago that we want to play on the international stage. That it wants to become a global city. And that's, to get to be a global city, it needs to be vibrant. It needs to have the right policy in place. And this slide essentially captures the strategy of going from a small city-state to a small but global, vibrant city. What must we do? One is to grow its population. Until 10 years ago, we are about 3 million people. Now we are 5.2 million people. And that's not because Singaporeans are giving birth, because we are still not staying at home to make babies. We imported people who have money or well-educated people from India, from China, from Southeast Asia, and from some European countries. So we needed to grow the population, to grow the economy. And to grow the economy, we have to do the right things. I will show you some of the things that we were doing and still continuing to do. We also place a lot of emphasis on tourism. And tourism has a lot of multiplier effect. The more people come to Singapore, if they're happy with it, they tell a lot of people, more people come, and this goes on. And of course, we don't want to be a very old village. we want to be a modern metropolis. Hence, the transformation of Singapore, that's my last point there, which is important. These things gave developers like us, we are a developer in Singapore, we have last year about 20% share of the market. And what does the government need to do when they want to achieve economic growth, population growth, tourism growth, and to transform the cityscape? It will require transportation, accommodation, which is residences, offices, hotels and service apartments, shopping centers, and medical centers. And we are all in this business. For those of you who don't know where we are about 12 hours away from Russia, from St. Petersburg. And for those of you who go to Bali or Bangkok, we are about 2 hours flying time from there. And we are surrounded by 3 billion people. As a world city, we're number 7, rising global city. In Asia, we are the most competitive city, ahead of Hong Kong and Tokyo. And it is a livable city in Asia. Lots of open spaces, safe, clean, green. One of the public parks on a Sunday afternoon. The financial center, the old financial center. This is al fresco dining by the Singapore River, a historical setting. These are the old and preserved or conserved buildings. There's Universal Studio in Singapore. And food. These are local food, of course, in Singapore. You can find Russian food if you need to eat Russian food. But you get all sorts of food in Singapore. And now we are I think we are the world's, outside of London, we must be the world's biggest private banking center. All the international banks are there, and these 42 banks manage $500 billion worth of private wealth. We are a global schoolhouse like Boston is in the US. We attract people, young, intelligent people from around Asia. And we twin with all these international branded schools, whether it's INSEAD, Duke, MIT, and all that. Yes, I just want to highlight this point. That in Singapore, there are 150,000 international students in a small city-state. Medical tourism, because we are surrounded by wealthy people, and typically they want to look young or they don't want to die. So they come to Singapore for medical care. And they spend lots of money because when they come, they bring their family, they go shopping, they do all sorts of tourism-related activities. Now, this is very important for any developer, wealth and population growth. We are 5.2 million people, and the government's intention is to take the population to 6.5 million. Because the country or the city is very small, it's 720 square kilometers, and therefore, real estate becomes more and more precious if the population grows, provided the economy is doing well. And we have no crisis. Unemployment in Singapore is about 2.5% because of the Asian economies which we are benefiting from. So GDP per capita is growing, population is growing, and it is one of the wealthiest city-state in the world. Just after Qatar, Luxembourg, Singapore is around 50 over $1,000 per capita, ahead of the USA and Switzerland. I think hard for you, for some of you to understand or accept, but that's a fact. Tourism. Remember, we are a country of 5.2 million people, and we want to attract this year about 13 million tourists. and they spend money. This is our new financial center in a new downtown. Similar to Hyde Park or Central Park in New York, we have Gardens by the Bay in the city center. This is in the city center. This is our new waterfront city. At the moment, there's just lots of containers. The ships come here to offload their containers, and this will be moved to the west and become a new waterfront living. If you want the sun and the sea, on our south side, there is a Sentosa Resort Island. And of course, shopping. One of the world's longest shopping streets. I think it's about 3 kilometers of shopping street. Now, this is the most precious for real estate. It is already now well connected by underground or public transport. We call it MRT, Mass Rapid Transit. But the government and we, Singaporeans, are not satisfied. We want to double our rail capacity. The government has money. It is, I think, one of the richest, and it's going to invest 50 billion in the Mass Rapid Transit in 10 years' time. What is more interesting for you is the second statement, that in Singapore, every household is expecting to have an MRT station within 600 meters of it. Every household. Because it's a small city-state, and the country has got money, and they can afford to do that. So for real estate developers, this is fantastic. When there's a MRT station, a Mass Rapid Transit, the housing, or whether it's office, residential, other commercial properties will appreciate in value. This is the new downtown, and this is the old downtown. So for one of the gentlemen is coming to Singapore in July, you get to see this. This is not a painted picture. I want to now play a 1-minute video of Singapore and our company, FIABCI organization. Can we restart?
Singapore is a vibrant city with world-class infrastructure supporting many thriving sectors, such as business, tourism, medical services, education, and transport. Singapore has been ranked first in the world for its investment potential and the world's easiest place to do business. Investors are drawn by Singapore's stable government and a strong and stable Singapore dollar, competitive tax structures, and a conducive living and business environment. All these rank Singapore as Asia's best country to live, work, and play in. Savvy investors also recognize that real estate in Singapore will continue to be a viable investment in the long term. Far East Organization, Singapore's largest residential developer, is well positioned to meet the demand from these investors with its wide array of properties. From its collection of ultra-luxury homes in the heart of the shopping and entertainment district of Orchard Road, to chic Soho apartments and seafront-facing developments in the prime areas. It is constantly reinventing itself to deliver new innovations that will bring value and a whole new lifestyle experience to its customers. We inspire better lives.
We have been doing property development for over 50 years, our company, and we have built over 700 buildings in Singapore. I just want to show you what we are now, the latest product. And today I have with me 3 other colleagues, so after the presentation is over, if you want to have a chat with my colleagues for us to give our views on development, you are welcome. Because with me, we have our Chief Development man, Mr. Chung, who's at the back. He has done all this development in the last 15, 16 years. And then we have another colleague, Mr. O. He does the communication, so whatever you see, all that is put together by him and his team. And then we have a lady colleague who does all the sales for us. Now here, this apartment, it is the most luxurious that we have. Each apartment is occupying one floor and it's about 420 meters. And each apartment sells for about 20 million, say about 17 million, 16 million US dollars. And that's the sort of views you get from the apartment. And then is high-rise living. This building is 62-story in the financial district. We have swimming pool in the sky. And then there are trans-urban living. That means these are just outside the city center, but they are very well connected. There's a shopping mall, and these will be the residences. People today in Singapore and in Asia, they like to live near a shopping mall. And of course, if they have an MRT station or mass rapid transit, they'll be delighted with that.
Price?
Price here, for a unit that is as small as 56 square meters, in US dollars, maybe about 600,000 US dollars. And then from this 138 square meter, that will be about 1.6 million US dollars. And in Singapore, we don't have mortgage problems. All the banks will lend up to 30%, 70%. So all you need is 30% down payment, and the bank will lend you 70%. And the mortgage rate in Singapore is only 1.2%. It's a very developed mortgage market. This is a new development in a new township. It's very interesting. There is residences, about 1,000 apartments, shopping center, about 35,000 square meters. And then, of course, there is a canal right in front, a 2.2 kilometer canal. This is built by the government. And that will be an impression of the finished product. People are enjoying themselves. And to give you a sectional view of this product, these are the apartments, that's a shopping center, and that's the mass rapid transit. And behind the mass rapid transit is a bus station, and there's also the LRT station, the light rapid transit. So it's an integrated development. Other developments in other parts of Singapore, again, these are Sohos, small office, home offices, high ceiling, giving buyers the verticality of space to create. And then there's another shopping center. And the MRT is just about 3-4 minutes walk away. And the bus station is also around there. So it's all very connected. Houses, single dwelling. And these houses are about 4 million US dollars per unit. More of such condominium, where the swimming pool is in the sky. Shopping malls that we built. Historical. Not as old as St. Petersburg, but this is warehousing converted into, these are pubs and restaurants, and their offices up here. Medical suites. I mentioned earlier that people want to come to Singapore, people from Southeast Asia, especially Indonesia, Burma, they come to Singapore for medical treatment, and therefore we make medical suites. And we sell them. And the medical suites are about 35,000 US dollars per square meter. Plenty of tourists, so therefore we build hotels too, and we have 11 hotels. This is the pool on the 22nd floor. That's a hotel. Another hotel where the pool is here. the lobby of the hotel. This is a historical part of Singapore. All these old heritage buildings, we bought these from the government and we then invested to refurbish them, but they are the old structures. This is a hotel fronting this building, the three. And we are building more hotels. This one is the design, or the interior designer is by a Spanish famous architect. I mentioned earlier about Sohos. This is a small office, home office. And this is a typical unit. High ceiling, that you can build a platform and you can have sleeping quarters or a restroom. But I'm going to show you a TV commercial which presented this concept. My next few slides is to show the attractive real estate environment in Singapore that helps developers to do business. First, in Singapore, there's no restriction on foreign ownership. The interest rate is at a historical low, 1.2% per year. Historical high liquidity, there's plenty of money. If you put money in the bank, the deposit rate is 0.05. So people, and any foreigners can borrow. There's no capital gain tax. There's no inheritance tax. And the government is very clear about the real estate environment it wants to create. Its objective is to provide a sustainable residential market where prices move in line with economic fundamentals. Therefore, to promote a stable and sustainable market. And how does the government do that? Controls the land supply. Public housing. 80% of Singaporeans live in public housing. And public housing is not cheap by most people's standard. An apartment, a flat, can cost about $400,000 US for a public housing flat. And of course, they control by using taxes and stamp duties. And Singapore is very multicultural. It is Malay, Chinese, Indians, people from Europe. Thank you.
Can we spare the questions? Well, I would like to read the questions. We have two questions now, but could we, you're leaving now, Mr. Chia, or can you?
I can be around. Let's see what's the time now. We must leave in about 40 minutes time. 40 minutes. Yeah.
So if we can very briefly have the two questions for 1 and 2, and then we will proceed with the others so that everybody will have the opportunities to speak as well. Okay, please, we have 2 or 3 questions very briefly, please. very briefly. Well, first there, then here, and second and third, please, with the microphone. Please, go ahead. First.
The speaker is not using the mic. Mic, please.
The mic, use the mic, okay.
Singapore is moving forward very actively. So how does the government deal with private land owners whenever they launch an investment project? How does the government negotiate with private land owners? Are there any mechanisms in place to work with landowners whenever there is a need to put an investment project on a piece of land that is in private hands?
No, you can just, somebody can translate the question.
He's going. And also, please, the last question so that you can answer all three.
The next question, please.
You have mentioned that, my name is Wolfgang Hamann, I'm chairing the session about social housing this afternoon. You have mentioned that public housing has a significant role in Singapore.
Substantial role.
Yes, 30% or?
80%.
How much?
80%.
80%. I wanted to ask, is the private sector involved in realization of public housing, or is everything done by the public itself?
And please, Mr. Chia, please, the third one, and that's it. We have three questions. Yes, here, please.
This one. So the question is, you told that one of the main concepts of Singapore government is to increase the population.
Yes.
And land is a limited resource. Are there any plans of the city government to increase the territory of Singapore? Is there, do you plan to increase it by the sea occupation, or maybe you plan to make an underground city, something like that?
We are doing, okay, let me answer them, please bear with me. We are doing exactly both. We are reclaiming land to expand this country by 10%. And how do we reclaim land? We buy sand. We used to buy sand from Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. But sometimes the countries around us do not want to sell us sand. Because from the sand, the land became very expensive. And they are not happy. And there's no easy formula. So that's one. Two, we are using underground caves to store oil. Of course, to store ammunition and other military things. So instead of occupying surface land, we're using underground to do business. So we're doing both. Great question. On land allocation, 80% of land in Singapore belongs to the government. So the government has a very powerful situation. When it needs to develop public housing, transportation, or national needs, it will acquire land. But there's a due process. And they pay today market price based on valuation. Of course, it took us 50 years to come to market price. 50 years ago, it was always a difficult thing on pricing. And then there's a question on public housing. Okay. Public housing is very, very important in Singapore. And I think it is the most successful formula of a small government. About 83% of Singaporeans live in public housing. And public housing are built by the government. They can subcontract, but they are all directed by the government. And it is considered subsidized housing. Today, a two-bedroom apartment is about 70 square meters, and you sell for about 250,000 US dollars. But it's finished. It have bathrooms and water closets, it have kitchen and all that. And a three-bedroom apartment, government housing, can be as expensive as 300 to 400,000 US dollars in the city center location. Yeah. private housing, that's where my colleagues and I are in, is only 20% of the market or less. The total housing stock in Singapore is 1.25 million units. Remember, 5.2 million people. Public housing, 1 million units. Private housing, 250,000 units. And every year, the market buys brand new flats, about 14,000 units a year. That's the environment. Thank you. I have to respect Chairman's view, and I'm going to go back to my seats. And thank you.
Only one thing, Mr. Chia, please. What is, you gave us a gift here. What is this gift? Please, is this your presentation?
Yes, this is a video of Singapore, but it's in Russian. So if you speak English, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Okay, thank you. Having heard this beautiful story of success since 1965, a country which is being developed for people to live, to work, to play in with good public transportation and high quality of living, education, medicine. It's really very enthusiastic for us developers all over the world. Thanks, Mr. Chia. Now I would like to have the second person to talk, and I would ask, if possible, Dr. Denis Kachkin, who's a lawyer, and he works with developers here. Please, from 10 to 12 minutes, if you can, okay? Thank you.
I think there is no remote control here.
Remote control.
Welcome all of you here because I'm. Thank you. Yes, so yes. I'm the resident here, and actually, it's a big honor for the city of St. Petersburg to welcome this delegation. I think that I'm a lawyer and I'm supposed to be boring. I know that a lot of delegates came here from different time zones, and they're supposed to be sleeping right now. But I'll try to do my best to keep you excited. So my presentation about the game rules in construction and development markets in Russia. And over the past decades, there have been significant change in the Russian legislation. It was aimed to improve the town planning and land code. And we had several reforms. These reforms can objectively be linked to the following factors. First, now we have completed the shift of the Russian economy to a free market. I would say that we are very close to completion of the land reform, under which the private land ownership was permitted and the new system was adopted. Going further, I would say that Russia is in a continuous process of integrating into the international system of economic relations, goods, capitals, and services exchange. And now we're facing a new challenge. It's a necessity for a modern legal regulation of town planning, land use, and relations in the sphere of real estate, taking into consideration, of course, the international experience. At the same time, I would like to highlight the most necessary and important principles on which the regulation in construction is currently based. This is what you have to know if you plan to develop or invest in the Russian Federation. First, the existing legislation creates a clear mechanism for implementation of town planning based on regional planning and time and land zoning. The purpose of such mechanism is to create an integral development plan taking into account interrelated needs of regions in various infrastructure, social, transport, and so on, and that leads to creation of an effective model of development in Russia as a whole. I would like to mention that there is a strengthening trend of market mechanisms for entitlement of land plots for construction and facilities for reconstruction through open tenders and auctions. And now we have almost finished the reform that helps us to have a functional system of state registration of land plots and transactions with it. So, next, the transition from an outdated inventory system to a modern system of real estate cadastre is very important now in Russia. It creates the uniform rules for everybody for the formation and registration of land resources. Now it's an electronic geographic systems they now created, and actually they are scheduled to be finished not later than the end of this year. What is also more important, and I'm proud to say that St. Petersburg is one of the leaders in this sphere, is the PPP. It's about public-private partnerships, and Russia is an emerging market. It's developing all the time, and we have a real need for infrastructure. We have a real need for renovation here, and I see a big space for foreign investors which are interested in conservative investments with low rates, but they are rather stable, to invest in social, transport, and engineering infrastructure. So we have successful real-life implementation of such projects in St. Petersburg. Moreover, Russian legislation enables you to participate in special economic zones, which provide special conditions for business in tax regulation, in customs regulation, and in the procedures of getting the land lease. And I would also point the general trend, the general policy of liberalization, and it's pointed mostly in the sphere of construction. And now we have the self-regulating in this sphere. The state, the government, has stepped aside and lets the market regulate itself. And also the procedures for permitting documentation, and there is a trend for simplification because there is a pressure from the international society. We have a very complicated documentation process in construction yet. On the other hand, still a lot of areas of further work and improvements to existing procedures. That's what I've been talking about. The indicated mechanisms do not always reach the projected goal. So these problems associated with the need of obtaining a huge number of different permits and improvements we expect them to be finished very soon as this transition period of the implementation of reforms in the field of town planning and land use, they are expected to be finished by the end of this year. But actually only few wealthy regions have now finished this work. Most of the Russian regions, we call them subjects of the Federation, they have just started this work. And this often leads to unnecessary bureaucratic delays and the need for settling many problems in manual modes, which is the very closest way to corruption, as you might expect. At the moment, the short-term concepts of legal regulation in the town planning and land use were adopted and introduced in Russia. So, the following planned activities can be highlighted among the others. Abolition of unnecessary division lands into categories, which has been introduced about 10 years ago. This would provide a more flexible urban policy. Next is that we have some improvements and strengthening of institutions that helps you to protect the property rights. The draft amendments to the civil codes that are now in the process of their adoption in the State Duma, State Parliament, they provide a lot of improvements to this institute, and it's a long discussion. I won't tell you about it, but this is really what happens now. And we hope that driving into electronic governments, into online formats of communication between business and government, it helps us to struggle corruption and unnecessary bureaucratic in this process. Also, we are rather open-minded in questions of implementing international experience, international approach in the sphere of regulation on construction market. We use, and it's a new trend, but it's very, I would say, incentive. We use international legal standards and tools in construction, such as FIDIC, AIA contracts, and though for today, until we do not have yet these amendments to the civil code that I've been talking about right now, we are limited by imperative norms and rules which we have in Russian civil legislation. And this is the result. A lot of contracts are concluded under foreign law, and a lot of disputes are resolved by foreign courts in international arbitration institutions. Though I would say that resolving a dispute in international arbitration, a construction dispute, it's very expensive. One of the most expensive trials that I've been observing for last years is a construction trial which happened in London Commercial International Arbitration, LCIA. The contract was governed by Russian law, and it had to be settled in London. So the London judges asked the parties to translate not only the contract and all the documentation, but the Russian construction rules, which are they are enormous actually. Speaking of construction market, it is worth mentioning that the current investment climate is rather favorable for foreign investors. And in lots of regions, they have special agencies supervising work with foreign investors, and in the city of St. Petersburg as well. Different regions provide different benefits for investors, and regulation of land use and regulation of construction in some spheres, it differs from region to region. And the difficulties are primarily connected with the need of compliance with the legislation and it involves complex and non-obvious mechanisms of processing the necessary documentation. Actually, the procedures of the Russian legislation, it's our experience, are not often valued correctly by foreign players and or taken into account superficially, and it leads to failure of meeting the time frames of projects and other difficulties. And St. Petersburg is quite favorable place. It's reflected in a well-developed infrastructure, constant developments and growth of the city, and good indicators of welfare. But we should, I should tell guys that there is a special risk in St. Petersburg if you plan to invest here. It's a historical and cultural heritage risk, because most of the territory of our city, it is protected, and it makes investment process not so predictable as it used to be. But actually it's a big discussion really, which has already been started at the beginning of this panel. Either we have to protect the city and do not allow to renovate anything, or we have to develop it, and it's not yet finished. Though the rules are rather clear, and we can help you to clarify them. Well, thank you for your attention. I would say, resuming my presentation, that regulation and construction in Russia is to a great extent better than the situation 10, 15 years ago. Thank you.
Dr. Denis, thank you for the presentation. I would like that anyone that has questions could spare them for the last moment, then you can do with the other people as well. So we could hear the other opponents, and then we would go ahead, and the questions will be posed afterwards. Okay. Now that we've seen the laws, and you were not a boring lawyer, definitely. You did a very dynamic presentation and very thorough. I would like to call Mr. Lev Margolin, please. Dr. Lev Margolin is a director for construction of Merrill and Maryland Development Corporation. Please, Dr. Lev, tell us if you can keep approximately 10 to 15 minutes, we would appreciate. Thanks.
Okay. Добрый день.
Добрый день.
Good morning. I'm not boring at all, not like the previous speaker, and that's why I think I got this slot. I'm very pleased to see a lot of familiar faces in the room. I can see there are a lot of professionals in real estate, and I will try to keep to the schedule. At the same time, I will try to keep on topic. So, integrated development, it's a very fashionable topic. It was reinvigorated because Russian developers finally realized that it is not only enough to try to get as much land as possible, but you have to actually start developing this land. Looks like it works pretty easily. Okay, so what is an integrated development? First of all, we're talking about the proactive engineering preparation, the architectural opportunities, environmental and energy efficiency, issues. And in conclusion, I will tell you about my company, what we are, and what we do in St. Petersburg. There are a number of areas that are important for the comprehensive development. First of all, it's redevelopment of depressed areas. There are also projects from scratch and the development of various urban conglomerates. Let me tell you a little bit more about the main issues associated with the integrated development principle. As I said earlier, I myself was in charge of the territorial department for development in Moscow, and our development principle was to start with engineering infrastructure. If you remember, we had huge territories that were developed for mass housing. We had to start with engineering networks. We had to build roads and create the transport infrastructure, and only then small districts were allocated for development. Today, if you look at Western countries, at developed countries, you will see that this is exactly the same principle that they apply to the development of large plots of land. They start with engineering infrastructure, and this is a very important component. Let us now get back to what is happening in Russia. Unfortunately, the principles have been lost. In the 1990s, when the Soviet Union collapsed, a lot of things have changed. We have not seen the principle of engineering infrastructure first applied since 1990. And all developers, all construction companies built on existing land plots using the existing infrastructure. What we have today is that there is no reserve, there is no built-in capacity. All the engineering networks operate at the maximum capacity. So we can see that today we have to go back to the original approach. There are a lot of issues, there are a lot of questions that we can ask our government. I understand that this is not the right place to ask these questions, but we're trying to do that everywhere possible, because this is something that needs to be resolved immediately. We're not talking only about engineering networks, we're also talking about the social network. It is impossible to develop a huge plot of land. You cannot build hundreds and thousands, sometimes millions of square meters of housing without building schools, kindergartens, various trade centers. So what can be done when we pursue the integrated development approach? We have to take into account the existing infrastructure, the existing architecture. We have to create an architectural ensemble. This is what we did in Israel. This is the Samarot project. It's a huge project, 11 hectares, but we're talking about the comprehensive development, which it now looks very well in the overall architecture. Another project, a project in New Ramat Aviv. Again, you can see that our project fits in the existing architecture. And this is what we can do in such countries as Israel. It was the government that took care of the engineering infrastructure, and it doesn't matter which fund is to pay for all this. It could be a territorial fund, a municipal fund, it could be a subscription. In any case, we had the system in the Soviet Union. We had the city budget, we had municipal budgets, we had regional budgets, but funds were allocated in order to develop the infrastructure first. The general plan was approved and adopted, and only then developers, at that time we had only government-run developing companies, only then the land plots could be allocated for construction. Only then tenders could be announced, and then the developers will build in accordance with the general plan. And this is what you have at the end. You have the existing infrastructure, there is the social infrastructure available, and the overall architectural ensemble is clear. There were 8 developers working on this huge project. As you can see, this looks like a single architectural complex. Again, we talked before about the difficulties that developers face when they have to try to fit their new ideas into the existing cities, especially if we're talking about huge cities. This is a very good example. Very modern buildings were somehow tuned to the existing architecture. The same approach can be seen here. And here I would like to make a link to a new area for Russia: environmental friendly building, green building, energy efficiency. Modern architecture, as part of the integrated development approach, makes it possible to use every inch of land efficiently. There's a lot of greenery, there's a lot of trees, a lot of grass, something that makes life in this area very pleasant. When we looked at the energy efficiency figures, we were amazed. Sometimes we keep saying about environmentally friendly projects, but it is not just about words, it's about figures, it's about money. Look at the modern approaches to development with green technologies. You can save up to 50% of energy. You can save up to 40% of CO2 emissions. You can save up to 40% of water. You can save up to 70% of waste. This is where we can find existing resources. And nature, the environment, is the only resource that we have here. This is one of the examples in London. IKEA bought a plot of land there, and this is a new project. Again, this is going to be an integrated development project. Of course, it is going to be environmentally friendly. It is going to be outside of London, and IKEA has just started the development of this project. Another very important, very famous project, Canary Wharf in London, the port that was the docklands that closed in the 70s. A lot of people were left unemployed. It's a big plot of land, and you can see the figures on the slide, but this is a huge plot of land. So the docks were closed in 1970s. In 1980s, the decision was made to set up a so-called London Docklands Development Corporation. And by the way, we criticize Russian bureaucracy, but it took 8 years in London to start the construction, because that was the time that it took to make the plans, to develop the project. And again, it took them 8 years. In 1988, they began the construction. Today, this is one of the most beautiful places in London, one of the most interesting projects, and this is one of the examples of how a depressed area was turned into a great mixed-use district. There's a lot of office space, they have a lot of shopping centers. It's a very good example of the integrated approach to development.
A few more exciting pictures, and let me tell you that in the neighboring areas, a lot of developers are now doing a lot of work. Let me tell you a little bit about Merlin Development. Merlin Development is a subsidiary created by an Israeli company to work in Russia. We are part of Fishman Group, a rather large international company that also listed on the London Stock Exchange. It was a very successful project. We were able to put up $300 million for Merland to invest in Russia. Currently, we have a lot of projects in Russia, in Yaroslavl, Saratov, and Moscow. We're building shopping centers, residential projects, as well as office space there. Our flagship project in St. Petersburg is called Triumph Park. It's a 40-hectare plot of land in the southern municipality of St. Petersburg. This was the first example when a Western company acquired a plot of land in St. Petersburg, and now it's owned by us. There were some other investment projects in cooperation with Chinese colleagues, for instance, the Baltic Pearl project. There were some other projects where the government would run a tender and some people would win with their bid. However, this is the first example where a foreign company purchased 40 hectares of land. Now it's their property. Overall, we are planning for 1 million meters square there. We have an integrated concept for that area. We will be building schools and nursery schools and other objects of infrastructural facilities there. This is where the project is located, a southern municipality in St. Petersburg in the direction of the airport. This is an area which used to be formerly owned by a Leto agricultural company that used to grow vegetables for St. Petersburg. So these are some of the conceptual pictures that we have here. They reflect our integrated approach with an environmental sustainability component. We purchased the land in 2005, 2006, 2008. We developed our master plan. The financial crisis of 2008, 2009 forced us to reduce the size of the project. We became more modest. We broke down the project into several stages. In 2009 and 2010, we adjusted the master plan in terms of its phasing. The first stage is rather modest, only 510 units. This project has been co-financed by Sberbank. They have been very forthcoming, and we are now progressing very rapidly. I would say that the market is really appreciating this new project. In just 6 months, we were able to sell over 60% of all units. This reflects a very good degree of appreciation because Mirland and its Triumph Park project, these were names that had not been heard of in St. Petersburg, but this probably illustrates the value of the Western approaches that we're bringing. We are always ready to share our experience and our approaches with our colleagues, so the market is welcoming us. We are seeing a lot of growth in terms of sales and overall interest. We plan to complete construction in 2012. This is just one building in the process of construction, 4 cranes you can see here. I hope that all the principles that I stated here will be embedded into this project very effectively. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Lev Margolin, for showing us the need for integrated projects, showing us that sometimes a country has some projects under one moment or during one moment, and then it may be lost for the loss changing or for the moments being different, but we can always look for the new integration, for the new forms of improving with what the world is doing in other parts and bringing to our countries. But always with energy effectiveness, like you said, and integration. Integration means we have to have houses not only independent, but with schools, with kindergartens, with medical centers, and all the other infrastructure needed. Thank you, Dr. Lev Margolin. We would have now the presentation of Mr. Juuso Hietanen, but since he had a problem, and he could not be here now. We will have somebody from the NCC Corporation, Dr. Alexander Izvinolobov. Please.
Добрый день.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If you permit me, I will speak in Russian, and I will try my best to answer whatever questions come my way. After this brilliant presentation of St. Petersburg, which was made by my colleagues, I'm really in a difficult situation because my task is to highlight some of the negatives. I love St. Petersburg. I'm afraid this is not my presentation. Could you change it to the NCC presentation? That's not my material. So I will try to be brief. I'm ready to take whatever questions that you may have. I have a pointer here. So very briefly about NCC. NCC is a group that chiefly operates in the Nordic countries, Germany, and generally northwest of Europe. The company was founded in Sweden about 140 years ago. About 6 billion euros a year is our annual turnover. In Russia, or rather in the CIS space, the company has operated for a long time already, about 40 years. A lot of projects were implemented under the aegis of international agreements by NCC. However, not a long time ago, it was decided that NCC would start operating in Russia, primarily with a focus on residential construction. I'm in charge of corporate development of NCC here in Russia, so my main objective is to develop residential. However, besides residential, the company obviously also engages in industrial construction, integrated development, and you see here in construction and civil engineering, it mainly stands for NCC Roads, because a lot of our work is in the road business, creating road infrastructure for the city of St. Petersburg. NCC Roads in St. Petersburg has its own asphalt factory. We are the third largest asphalt producer in the city. This is the company's performance relative to other companies in the region. We hold the second place after Skanska. I would say Skanska is more global, more international, even though they're registered in Sweden. They're more of an American company. Well, considering the fact that NCC is a Western company, it has its own mission, vision, ideology, and the principles of work which have translated over time into our corporate lifestyle, which means that this culture pervades whatever we do. So what is this mission or vision? We would like to make life as comfortable as possible for those people who come to work or live there. In particular, we're paying a lot of attention to the sustainability aspects of our projects. We have a very rigid, or rather a very ambitious plan for the future, and very strict standards. You know that in Europe they use very stringent sustainability and environmental standards. We try to surpass these standards by at least 20%. In other words, we want to be 20% more efficient in Sweden relative to the Swedish standards. Here in Russia, the goal is to exceed by 25%, and obviously NCC subscribes to all the international instruments such as 20 by 20 by 20 and so on and so forth. The passive housing arrangements, we also subscribe to them. Also, this is in this slide you can see a very brief rundown of the different areas of work that we pursue. As you see, a lot of that has to do with roads, because roads is where you have some of the cutting-edge technologies being explored currently. It's difficult to really make any revolutionary changes in residential construction or any or construction per se. This is a very important slide which answers the question, do people really value sustainability, sustainable development? How much do they appreciate this concept? Well, of course, in Europe, people appreciate this a lot. We try to be agents of change here. In Russia, we try to sensitize companies and users to these concepts so that they appreciate it as well. What is the green approach? What does green really mean? Does it mean environmental friendliness, energy efficiency? I would say that all these aspects become one package. They all come together in a single concept. Green means a high-quality building, high quality of construction, a conducive and healthy environment for the dwellers, a favorable environment, schools, availability of different amenities, and so on and so forth. All these different dimensions constitute what we call green. Well, obviously, sustainability, sustainable development, energy efficient development are coming to the forefront of the users' expectations. If we think back to the 1990s and the residential construction practices back then, housing was mainly an investment for people, and people did not really care that much about how safe and secure they would be in these dwellings. But the culture, the overall culture, awareness is growing among the population. We understand that St. Petersburg is a place from where people travel a lot. We know that Russians now have a lot of opportunities to see what's happening around Russia in other countries, and NCC is a company that is committed to these principles. So for some of the advanced users, we are a magnet, we are a company that whose products they value. Well, here are some general statements about how important sustainability is. It really is important, but the downside, the negative aspects that I wanted to focus on in my presentation have to do with why this is not working in Russia. One reason is that obviously Russia has a relatively low cost of energy resources. Even though we have joined the WTO, we will still be protecting ourselves. And if you look at the petrol prices are about the same as in Europe, so it's difficult to say how effective that protection is or is going to be. Russia does have very high costs associated with implementing high technology solutions. Unfortunately, a lot of the materials that are produced in Russia are not up to the standards, and those that are up to the standards have to be imported, which increases their cost. You also have to monitor construction processes very closely, because unfortunately when a new technology is adopted in Russia, with time the quality of implementing that technology usually goes down, so there needs to be a lot of supervision, a lot of oversight. All these different reasons and causes are listed here why these technologies cannot work in Russia. We're not that keen on the environmental aspects. We're not committed enough to them. The users themselves, the consumers, are not yet educated well enough to appreciate this. The businesses themselves are not prepared to incur additional costs associated with implementing the sustainability aspects. I would also say that we're sort of reluctant to follow the different regulatory initiatives and improvements in European legislation related to ensuring sustainability. A couple of words about NCC's projects in St. Petersburg. We only operate in St. Petersburg currently. We don't have any plans to expand to other regions of Russia. So what do we do? Our approach is to try to adapt or transform or translate the company's standards here to demonstrate that our standards are implementable in Russia, and that certainly involves a lot of effort. Sometimes we need to really turn the situation around when we advocate for this with different stakeholders here. So we are the precedent setters here, and sometimes it helps when you're able to show a document which is based on your understanding with a government agency. That usually helps in other places. So we try to do a lot of work with the government. We try to do a lot of awareness raising. We try to also use the best of our experience in other countries in order to change the situation. Let me talk about this project, Swedish Krona in Primorsky district, which is being implemented using the traditional construction technologies that are usually used in Russia, the brick and monolith technology. This is not something that's very common in other places, in other NCC projects. We rely more on the so-called panel technology. And let me tell you, even though there's some distrust towards the panel technologies, if those panel structures are built with high quality, they can be just as reliable. So we are planning for some 900 apartments with semi-recessed parking. So far, the first stage of that project has been commissioned. For us, when we approach sustainability, we identify the following components. First, number one is energy efficiency. I understand, I'm sorry, I'm really wrapping up here. So energy efficiency, reduced energy costs, healthy environment. People who live in these houses need to be able to really secure their health and preserve their health. When we declared this project, we won the Green Awards concept. We're currently using the recuperation system in our project. We're using that technology in the same way as in Sweden, Finland, and other places. And I can assure you that this is the only project that has been approved in accordance with these standards. We also plan to receive a BREEAM accreditation. Once again, briefly the mission of the company, and I think I would like to leave it there. I'm ready to take your questions.
Thanks, Dr. Alexander. Thank you. We've seen a big company, international company, coming to Russia, where the rules are being re-established, redeveloped, and bringing concepts just like sustainability with an approach that should be carefully and gradually introduced into this society, into the culture. Sustainability is something that is here to be permanent, but sustainability has to be good business, as we've seen here. Okay. Now, before the questions, I would like to have a very brief communication by Dr. Alexander Sharapov, the president of the National Guild of Real Estate in Russia. Please, Dr. Alexander Sharapov.
Good day. I will speak Russian because it's more comfortable for me, and maybe, but I can speak with you in the couloirs with English. Okay.
Russia is a leader in terms of the number of people who own their housing. The so-called privatization process was completed, and today the government owns only approximately 14% of all the housing in Russia. And that means that the commercial rent, for commercial rent, only 11% is available. So the majority of housing is owned by Russian residents. Over the past few years, we have seen new projects that were created by developing companies for rent. And these first projects yield the final investors approximately 10% per year. The development of the rental housing is to increase the mobility of the population, is to help people find solutions to their housing problems. In July 2011, Prime Minister Putin in Stupino made a decision, and this was a very important decision, that Russian citizens should be provided with housing, but this housing should be provided in the form of social housing or government-subsidized housing. I spoke in front of Prime Minister Putin, and I'm proud of the fact that the Russian government decided to support the social housing, which will take the form of rental housing. As you can see today, 75% of all housing is in the hands of private owners, of those who live in these apartments. 67 millions of square meters will be commissioned this year. The task is to double this number so that there was 1 square meter built per person in Russia per year. It is believed that 30% of all housing construction will be rental housing. The Developers Guild, together with the Russian government, will have to develop a new concept for the rental housing in Russia by July 2012, and in January 2013 we expect that the bills will be passed on to the State Duma, the Russian parliament, and these new laws will regulate the development of rental housing in Russia. About 3 weeks ago, this decision was finally made by the Russian government. The meeting took place in Istra, and representatives of FIABCI-Russia reported there on the trends in rental housing development. The main barriers includes the current legislation and the need to introduce certain amendments, but also the fact that Russian investors want to get at least 10% ROI. If you look at the yield brought by other sectors in Russia, you will see that investing in retail in Moscow, you can reach 9% for a shopping center. In St. Petersburg, this number would reach approximately 11%. In Russian regions, you will get approximately 12 to 13%. Similar figures can be achieved by investing in commercial real estate, and since rental housing is very stable, it is probably the most stable in the world, you cannot find any of the American companies that invested in rental housing go bankrupt during the crisis, because people who own rental houses received a lot of new clients. People had to leave their homes that were taken by banks, and they had to move into apartment houses and rent apartments there. Our company invested a lot in such rental houses in Germany and in the US, And Russian investors are very interested in getting a stable source of income coming from the rental housing. There are a number of goals that we formulate for ourselves, but I think it would be most interesting for you to listen to what I can say about specific products. A new project was started in Kaluga 2 years ago, and the interesting thing is that it is happening in Kaluga, which has approximately 300,000 population. It is a very dynamically growing town. There are several big industries there. Renault just built a factory there. Magna built an industrial facility there. So they started a project that generates the final investor a lot of money. The developer got his share, but the investor now gets approximately 11% per year. This project was finished 2 years ago, and it is quite stable. There are 500 hectares outside St. Petersburg, and the master plan for this territory has been completed. The owners of this plot plan to build housing, shopping centers, office space, but also they plan to have some houses for rent, apartment houses for rent. Right now, this whole territory was divided into sublots, and the documentation is in the pipeline. I'm certain that next year we will be able to launch the construction process. The private-public partnership is a very growing area in Russia. And in Russia, if the Prime Minister decided that something should be done, there are a number of funds to be created for that at the regional level. And so the regional authorities are very active in supporting the rental housing in St. Petersburg and Leningrad Oblast. The representatives of both governments are ready to meet with investors to discuss various opportunities. St. Petersburg has a number of projects to offer. Together with our partners, we create a new project here for 900 units. The developer will get approximately 10% of yield, and we are ready to sign a contract so that the developer could buy it back and get 20%. It is a very interesting segment, and at 3 o'clock today we will have a separate section dedicated to social housing in Russia. I would like to invite you all to come, and there will be more that we will explain to you. I would also like to invite you to come back in September 2012. We're going to have a trade show at Pro Estate. We will discuss development issues there, and 3 days will be dedicated to such issues. We will have Russian ministers, bureaucrats, developers, investors present. You will hear a lot about various opportunities that Russia has to offer. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Dr. Alexander Sharapov, President of the Guild of Real Estate in Russia. That gave us also some very good information on new projects and also the news that many investors are interested in social housing in Russia, and also the the renting here in Russia will grant approximately 10%, may grant approximately 10% as compared with 11-12% in commercial. So many investors are interested, and we still have 5 minutes to some questions. If you want to make a question, please say your name and then to whom you are addressing your question. Hamilton Leite from Brazil, please, the first question. I would ask that the ones that will answer be very brief. Thanks.
My question is for Mr. Alexander from NCC. How much additional cost would a project have here in Russia compared to a conventional building for a certified
Additional costs. Obviously, this is the first question that everybody asks, whether or not there are any additional costs. There's one way to answer it, or actually there are two ways. Number one, when you buy new equipment, if you install new equipment, you do incur certain additional costs because you have to buy equipment, you have to install this equipment. On the other hand, we buy and install an efficient system and we replace an inefficient system. So basically, we're not talking about buying a new system, we replace an old system, so we cut the costs this way significantly. But my answer would be this. When we talk about additional costs, we have to keep in mind that similar systems are a compulsory element in Finland, in Sweden. It is not considered to be an additional cost. However, here we decided that we will pursue the same philosophy. So we do not believe that this is an additional cost. But yes, in a way, you can say that this is an additional cost compared to conventional buildings. This is supposed to become a new standard. We should not look at it as an additional cost. It is an additional cost today. We hope in the future it will be a standard package that we offer. It will not be seen as extra cost.
May I pose a question to Mr. Chia before he leaves?
Yes,
how did you start, or almost start, a country in 1965? In such a small period of time, you built a beautiful country with stability of rules, with sustainable growth, with environmental protection, and which quality of living is a standard, it should be a standard for the world. How did you do it in such a small period? What were the few, 2, 3, 4, 5 big principles that led you into this new opportunity?
I think one is political stability. The West may question Singapore in the old days for lacking democracy, but for that reason, there was stability, so the country could get about creating jobs. And the jobs then created wealth, which in turn gave people an option on housing. And then, of course, to provide housing, the government was very forceful in acquiring land, developing public housing, and helping the people to buy the public housing. In Singapore, about maybe 90% of housing are owned by the people who live in the housing. So that's an important thing. And it's also a government and a people that is always not satisfied with its current success. We are always looking to better ourselves because we are a small island and we import all our things, all our food, vegetables, everything is imported. So today we rely on services, financial services, international trade, tourism, education, as I said earlier, medical and all that. It's an open economy. We have a strong, stable currency versus the US dollars, the rubles, and the euros. We have been appreciating in the last 10 years. So that has been a way. It's multicultural. We welcome people with open doors. Better still if you are wealthy and you're talented. Education in Singapore is practically free of charge if you are Singaporean. You pay very little. In secondary school, you pay about, I think for every 3 months, you pay about $40 US. But the taxes in Singapore, the indirect taxes are quite a few. Direct taxes are not very high. They get a lot of money from controlling car population. I mean, the example I think is a good job. If you want to buy a car in Singapore, you first must buy a license to buy a car. This license is only valid for 10 years. And this license varies from $30,000 to say $60,000 to buy a car. And that's one way of raising revenue. Personal taxes and corporate taxes are very low. It's about 19%, and it's a very simple tax. There's VAT, or we call GST, of 7%. So in summary, the government is very determined.
How much percent?
GST or VST is 7%.
7%.
Yeah. And personal income tax is about, I think, 19%. Corporate taxes is also about 19-20%. So that's the maximum. So in summary, my short question is, if you provide the stability and you facilitate the business to grow without forgetting the social issues, and as we grow along, you give people more space for democratic values. I mean, this is it's not easy, but when when these factors congregate, then you have the opportunity to grow. Thank you.
What a nice example. Thank you, Mr. Chia. Okay. Do you have very urgent and very needed questions, or can we end our presentation? No questions? Okay. Thank you. Thanks for all of the speakers, and it was a pleasure to be with such a good public like you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I haven't given you the word.
No.
I think we did it.
Yes,
we could do it.
Yeah.
You too.
I have not wanted to do the presentation of our real estate here because it's
Caramba, ia conseguir. Foi bom, né? Vocês também. Vou ficar com saudade de vocês lá. Bebam coisas boas para lembrar de nós.
I want to say
Igor.
it was really a pleasure.
It was a real pleasure.
You're a good leader, I want to say. And coming just in time.
We would like to
Yes,
receive
I
you there.
receive it.
Okay.
Yes, I take one.
Okay.
No, it's. I will see.
Okay. Taiwan. This is my last. The last one. Okay. Okay, thank you. Ciao. Ciao, Ho, Mr. Ho. Okay. Okay. We will be there next year. Thank you.
задача ввести, даже 10 человек, чтобы бабушки согласились официально получать стипендию, чтобы согласились платить налоги. И вот все это очень красиво. В России все это очень не любит. Очень страшно строить жилье, не имея конечных контрактов, не имея возможности спрогнозировать ставки, потому что это основной сегодняшний день риск, потому что построить это несложно.
Раз, два, три. Раз, два, раз.